And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Gareth Duignam, non-traditional spiritual teacher who positions himself as a friend, an equal, and a companion to his students, fostering an environment of mutual growth and discovery. His mission is as clear as it is powerful: to empower individuals to ascend to peaks of self-awareness and awakening that he himself has realized. Gareth, welcome back. It's good to have you on the podcast again.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's great to be back with you. Happy to be here.
Many people watching right now probably didn't see you during my Saturday night live stream. So for those who are new meeting you right now, can you please give us a little bit of your history on how you became a spiritual teacher?
So it was something I never, ever imagined that I would do. I grew up in Dublin, and I had, from a very young age, I had a feeling of not belonging, feeling sort of like I had been dropped into the wrong place, wrong family, wrong neighborhood, just didn't seem to fit in. And I went through, I don't know, years and years of this strange feeling of never fitting in, right? Having friends, but always just feeling that I was somehow just, a little bit different from everybody else. And I had a fear of dying as well. I just couldn't get my head around the whole concept of, like, if something happens and we die, that's it. It's just over. I wasn't religious. So at around the age of about 24, 25, I was going on vacation, and I was going out with a girl at the time, and I was bored on the plane, and she gave me a book about self-help. And I started reading this book. It was called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And I just couldn't believe some of the concept I was reading in this book, that, my thoughts could somehow influence my reality and how I could heal myself. And I immediately just kind of went, okay, I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm gonna try. So I started practicing some of the exercises, and really, really fast, I started to notice that my world started to change. My life started to change. I started, to feel less fear and anxiety in my life. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. Um, so a lot of it was to do with manifestation and affirmations. And I just started doing these simple little techniques of, making these statements about my life and myself. And I just started to notice that my world started to change. I had more abundance, more happiness in my life, more peace. And I started to see that, wow, life is getting better just by saying these simple words. So that sort of led me then on a kind of a quest to learn more. I started, buying lots of different spiritual books, and um, I started meditating. One of the recommendations in this book was to try and meditate. And on my very first meditation, I dropped into this space of what felt like complete freedom. My mind disappeared. I was just unbound awareness. And I was like, oh, this is meditation. I got a real taste of it, and I was like, I want that. It didn't last very long. My mind came in pretty quick, but I had somehow gotten a taste that there was something very special when we choose to meditate, quiet the mind. There was something there. And so yeah, over the next couple of years, I started meditating. Never really got back to that first glimpse. It was almost like it was just a little, like a carrot on a stick to get me interested. But it gave me enough that I just kept going. And then eventually I kind of ran into a brick wall with the whole thing. I just, was like, okay, my life got a bit better. I feel happier, but what next? And for a few years, I kind of just coasted along. And then I came across a gentleman called Bob Monroe. Bob Monroe wrote all these books about out-of-body experiences. And I was just like, wow, isn't that amazing? I bought all his books. Started watching his videos on YouTube. It was around 2009, 2010. And I was like, I really want to have them experience this, but I want to do it. I don't want to just listen to him and say, this is what it is. I want to do it. So I started practicing and practicing. And I also came across one of the individuals that Bob had wrote about. He had these explorers who worked in his laboratory for consciousness, and one of them was a gentleman called Tom Campbell. He's a physicist, and I came across Tom, and I reached out to Tom because Bob had died in the meantime. So I reached out to Tom and sent Tom a message, and I said, Tom, I said, I really want to have these out of body experiences. Can you help me? Next day, I had a message back from Tom, and he had given me, a link to his website, research this, research that. And 2 nights later, I woke up in the middle of the night with energy rushing up and down my body and this jet engine sound in my ears. And I knew what it was because I'd been reading all about it. And this was a prelude to an out of body experience. All of a sudden, I felt 2 hands come in, grab me under the arms, and pull me out of my body and catapult me through the ceiling. And I started flying across the fields nearby. And eventually I came down and landed in a field in the out of body state. I looked at my hands, I looked down at my body. I seemed to have a replica of my physical body, but I was somehow detached, and I looked and I said, I've done it. I got really, really excited. And then this big elastic band felt like it reefed me, pulled me right back to my body. And I jumped up and I went, I did it. I was really, this was a big turning point for me because I was like, I don't die. That was the biggest thing. I wanted to know what happened if my body died, would I live on? And this was answered straight away with this experience. It was realer than real. So for the next year and a half, I started having these spontaneous out of body experiences. I would just wake up randomly with energy rushing up and down my body, and I could separate, and I would get out and explore and, see things and see beings. And I had lots of fun with it, but eventually it seemed to dim down. They started to get less and less. And then I started to enter this second phase because there wasn't a lot of, even though I was having these great experiences, there wasn't an awful lot of like what I would call spiritual growth happening from them.
How do you know that you weren't just dreaming? Like, how do you know you were really out of your body?
So these experiences, when you have them, they are more, it's more real than this reality. So it feels like everything is super high definition. And there's a phenomena called the vibrational state that starts. And this is, you're awake, you're not dreaming. You wake up from sleep and you can actually feel these vibrations moving up and down your body like a wave, starting at the toes and going all the way up to the top. And the energy that starts to build up, it feels like your head is in between 2 jet engines. And it gets violent. It almost like it feels like the whole room is shaking, vibrating, and it kind of gets to this crescendo, this sort of climax. And once it gets to a climax, that's your key to separating. So you can just sort of roll out, or you can imagine yourself to move away. And I've actually gotten out and turned around and looked back at my body in the bed. So for me, it was more real than this reality when I was having these experiences.
You
This wasn't just
mentioned
a dream.
you mentioned that the
Yeah,
first time there was 2 hands that grabbed you and pulled you out.
yeah,
Who was that?
yeah. I don't know who it was. I don't know who it was. A non-physical helper, a guide, just to give me a helping hand at the start.
I think a lot of people want to get out and may get close, but they have fear, which inhibits them. That's
Yes.
true. How do you overcome the fear?
Yeah. So the fear is one of the biggest blocks to going out of body. And for me, there was a little bit of fear just in the vibrational state because it's sort of like the feeling you get when you don't know what's under your bed. You can't really see. You're sort of kind of in between 2 worlds. So you're half here and you're half in the non-physical. And what happens is you get an awful lot of it's almost like beings on the other side can all of a sudden notice what's happening, and they come in and you can hear your name being called and wind and And it's kind of just almost like if you're swimming in the ocean and, you know, you don't really know what's below, but if you have a snorkels, you can put them on, you can look under, you feel a bit more comfortable knowing what's there. So there was always a little bit of fear just as I was about to get out. But once I got out and I could see around, I was totally fine.
Did you see other beings or other
Yes.
things
Yes.
that
There's lots
weren't
of beings.
physical, like energies and
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, so one of the first things that I noticed was when I got out and I got onto the streets was that there were people just floating around. Now, were they regular humans just dreaming? You know, one of the things early on, I remember going, I'm going to go to my parents. And I got to my parents' house. Just and how you travel is you just think of the place you want to be in, and you're just there. Right? All of a sudden, I was just there at their bedroom, and I could see their both of their bodies in their beds, and their higher selves were sat at the end of the bed talking to me. And then the next day I asked them, had they any recollection of the conversation, and they didn't. So when I was out of body, I noticed that there was just beings everywhere. They were just floating around. You could go up and try and speak to them, but they weren't really, they didn't really notice you. They just went along with their business. One evening I got out of body. I rolled. So I used to roll when the vibrations would happen. I would imagine myself rolling, and I would roll off the side of the bed. And one evening I dropped down and I dropped through the ceiling and I landed in my sitting room, and there was two teenage girls sat on the floor in their pajamas. I mean, 12, 13, with pillows sat on their laps, talking to one another. And I kind of stopped and I looked and I went, wow, that's really interesting. And the two of them turned around and noticed me, and they got scared and they ran through the wall. I thought that's so strange. And I looked, I kind of maneuvered myself to where the mirror is over my fireplace, and I could see my reflection in the mirror somehow. And I was totally translucent, like I was made of water. Pretty scary looking. But they were dead children who were still stuck around.
Do you have a really old house and they had some
No,
attachment to it?
no
Or
modern house. No modern house. I was the first person to ever live in this house. They're just anywhere. They can just pass through walls, sit where they want.
I recently had a guest that talked about that every night when we sleep, when we're in REM state, we have an out of body experience. Is
Yes.
that true?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So leading on from the OBEs, so the classic OBEs I was having started to die down, and I then started to find myself becoming lucid in dreams and becoming lucid in classrooms. So I was somehow falling asleep, and my soul or my being was then leaving, because I mean, there's so much time, right? There's 8 hours of every night where we fall asleep. We learn, we go off to classrooms. We just don't have any recollection of it. So I was waking up in classroom situations, sat at desks, having conversations with teachers and guides. Um, and I was put through a whole series of fear tests. Um, that just kept happening and happening. And one of them was a test around dying. So they wanted me to be okay with the death process. So they let me experience what it was like to die. So literally, the intelligence would come in and would say, "Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to bring you to the edge of death." And I would say, and they would say, "Are you ready?" And it wasn't like it's not a person; it's just an intelligence. And I say them, and they would say, "Are you ready?" And when I say the voice, it's not like it wasn't speaking in sentences; it was just knowings. And they would get me to the edge, and then they say, "Okay, we're going to move into the death process." And it would feel like I was just going from waking to sleeping or sleeping to waking. And I would go, "Oh," and they'd say, "Okay, then that's it. Now let's go back." And they would bring me back into, now you're back into the your alive state. And we've done this maybe 7 or 8 times. And they said, "That's it. That's all there is to it. That's what it feels like to die." And they said, "Are you happy?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We don't need to come back and do this again."
At what point would you say that you had a spiritual awakening? How would you define
Okay.
that?
had a misconception of spiritual awakening. I kind of presumed that what I was going through was a spiritual awakening, right? And I mean, in a sense, having an OBE, that is a spiritual awakening. But I was convinced that spiritual awakening was when you became interested in spirituality and maybe you started working on yourself, until I had a spiritual awakening. And a spiritual awakening is a part of the divine or God that wakes up and experiences itself through your physical form. It's not the individual having an experience, it's a part of you that's much greater, and it wakes up and looks out through your eyes. And when I had my first spiritual awakening, it was as if God woke up and looked out through my eyes. And I knew I had all this supreme knowledge came in. I knew how everything worked, how the universe worked. Um, would you like me to get into that?
Yes, and while you're at it, when you're saying God wakes up and looks through your eyes, are you having some sort of realization that you are God, or at least part of you is God?
Well, we are part of God. We're all part of God. All of us, every single individual, every insect, every animal on the planet is part of God. We're all made up of, we're individual units of what God is.
All right, well, then how do you separate your consciousness from God? Because you're saying God wakes up within you.
Yeah,
What do you mean by
yeah.
that?
So we are individual units of that larger consciousness, God, the universe, and we what happens is we fall asleep in a dream. Basically, I'm just using that metaphor, right? We come into this reality, we fall asleep, we forget what we really are, and we identify with what's around us, right? The outside world, the bright lights, the money, the cars, all that kind of stuff, and we get totally caught up in it, and we believe that we are a separate individual with a body, and our egos, our minds is a and the ego is just a part of consciousness that's kind of making us feel okay with uncertainty and fear. So basically, that part of our intellect kind of wants us to be okay with not knowing, right? So it comes in and it tells us all these things and it makes us, feel like we're separate and special. Okay. On the flip side, it can be negative. So we completely forget what we really are, our true nature. And a spiritual awakening is when our true essence has enough, it kind of breaks through and remembers itself through our form. So it's not like we get anything from it. It's not like the individual has an attainment. It's like a remembering. It's a realizing what we once were. For a number of days, I was kind of getting this weird feeling that I was being watched. Kind of can't put my finger on it, but I was like, something feels weird. I was kind of getting this, like the Truman Show. Did you ever watch the Truman Show?
Yeah, good movie.
Yeah. So it was kind of like the Truman Show. I kind of felt like cameras were watching me, and I would hear music, and I felt like there was messages coming through the music trying to get my attention. And I got up one morning at 7 a.m. and went to the gym. I walked in and just something felt weird this morning. There was beautiful sun coming through the windows and sounds of the clanking weights and people working out. And I just stopped. I'd been working out and I just kind of stopped and looked out the window. And I kind of said something to myself. I kind of went, that sun that I'm seeing, I said, it's not outside of me. I said, it's inside of my consciousness. And then I kind of listened to the music and I was like, the music is actually internal. I'm hearing that inside of my head. And as soon as I said that to myself, there was a rip of Velcro. It felt like Velcro ripped in my mind, like a whoosh, like this. And as soon as that happened, it was like, and here's the connection to the lucid dreams that I was having, right? Because if anyone's ever had a lucid dream is when you wake up in the dream and you realize that you're dreaming, right? And you can be in the dream, but there's a part of you that's still in the bed having the dream. So what this awakening was the universe had fallen asleep and dreamt itself into my form. And when that Velcro ripped, it became lucid through my form. and it looked around and it knew all the information came in, it started coming in. It was like, oh, I am the universe. I'm dreaming myself into this individual, Garrett with his business and his money worries and all of them things. And I've completely forgotten what I am. And I was like, wow, everything became really vibrant. I started to feel really blissful. And then I started to look around and I was like, the noises are also me and the walls are me. And I was like, the weights and the machines are me. And then I looked at the other people in the gym and I was like, oh, so I'm dreaming myself into this individual, Garrett, and I've just woke up now through this individual, but I'm also the same entity that's dreaming itself into all of the individuals in the gym, but they're still sleepwalking, they're still dreaming, right? So it had just woke up in this one form. So my nervous system couldn't maintain that. That was almost like God realization. So my nervous system couldn't maintain it, and it closed down after about 15, 20 minutes. Um, the next day I woke up and I just felt different. There was a freedom and a sense of like I'm unbounded. I just felt like I was I just felt free, totally free. And I was now in what they call self-realization. But I didn't know what it was. All of a sudden it was just like I had taken off a really uncomfortable tight shoe and I just felt, wow, all my anxieties were gone, my fear was gone, and I just felt so relaxed and so great. And I couldn't believe it. So for the next couple of days, I just walked around in this beautiful state, going on walks, looking at everything. Everything looked really beautiful and vibrant. I was now totally, there was still a sense of me. My personality was still here, but there was the identification with my ego had somehow snapped. And there was a new part of me that I had never known before it had come to the foreground and it felt amazing. That was self-realization. So I was now in a state of permanent self-realization. And that's when I became a spiritual seeker. So I wasn't actually a spiritual seeker until I had the awakening. Once I had the awakening, I wanted to know what had happened. So I went on a quest. I started looking for teachers. Eventually I came across a couple of teachers and I was like listening to them speak and I was like, that's exactly what's happened to me. And then I embarked on my journey. And the journey there was a whole lot of different processes and other realizations that happened.
I think we're supposed to be asleep while we're here. That's the whole point. Do you think that having these realizations like you had messes up the experience while we're or
No,
lessens it?
no, no. We come in here. It's a learning. It's a schoolhouse, right? We come in here to learn, to go through life, and we have multiple lives, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And a lot of times we don't get it, right? And we have to keep coming back, learning the same lessons. So our true nature is to awaken from the dream. That's what the goal of this is we have to wake up from the dream and realize our true nature and remember ourselves as a part of God, right? We yes, we are individual units. We also have our own sort of separateness as well, right? We're here, we have free will, and eventually what I've come to understand is that once we get it, we then have to help others to have that awakening. And that's kind of how I fell into my role at the moment as a teacher and a guide.
So after all this happened, at some point you became a channel for forces like Shakti and Sat energy. Can you tell us what those energies are and how this all happened?
Yeah. So as we go through the spiritual awakening, our consciousness starts to change. It starts to basically there's two parts to spiritual awakening. Our perception of how we see the world changes. Okay, we go from being the individual ego to being unbounded awareness. But our nervous systems, we're in human bodies and we're totally limited by our nervous systems. So on the flip side of that awakening, we have an energetic system called Kundalini. right? Which is an energy life force that resides in all of us at the base of our spines. And as we start to go through this spiritual awakening, the Kundalini starts to rise. It's like a little small snake about the size of half of your little finger. And it eventually comes out of its resting place and gets into the central channel of the spine. And its goal is to rise. So if we take the analogy of Shiva and Shakti, right? Shiva is awareness, Shakti is the dynamic force. So Shakti wants to rise all the way up into the consciousness and merge with Shiva. So that's the dance. So what happens is the Kundalini starts rising, it starts penetrating and piercing the chakras. And as it's doing that on the journey, it starts to purify and heal traumas and all sorts of, they're known as samskaras that we store in our systems. And eventually it gets all the way up into the brain. And we have, they call it the thousand petaled lotus. It opens up, the crown of the head opens up, the crown chakra. And in the Eastern philosophies, they call that enlightenment when the Kundalini goes all the way up. So I had a full Kundalini awakening, and very soon after, I noticed that I became transmissive. So if I was meditating with people, I then could kind of give them a taste of what them energies felt like. They would have an experience much deeper if they were meditating by themselves, by meditating in me. So what happened was, yeah, it just started with one or two friends. We would meet on Zoom, and then over time, it just started growing and growing, and more people started turning up. And now it's like over, there can be over 100 people turn up in my Zoom groups to feel these energies.
Are you leading them through some sort of meditation?
Yes, yes, that's how I do most of my work. So early on, my dad actually was going through a bit of a hard time, and I was trying to help him. And I was telling him what about my spiritual awakening, and he's like, if only I could have that experience, I'd be free of my suffering and my problems. But I couldn't teach it to him. I couldn't tell him what to do. And I could kind of gone, wow, I wonder if I could give people a taste of my state, that would be, much easier. So I kind of asked that, like I kind of put that question to the universe, is this something I could do? And it came back as a yes. And then eventually I kind of found myself, um, and through no, it wasn't something I wanted to do. It was all just purely by mistake. It just kind of grew into it, and eventually my group grew, and people wanted to do one-on-one sessions, and then eventually I started doing retreats. So yeah, people, that's what people come. They come to get a taste of those energies, and sometimes it really changes them.
Are you somehow projecting your energy into them, or are you helping them raise the energy within themselves?
It's kind of both, right? It's almost like it's everybody's birthright to have this awakening, right? We're all part of it, right? None of us are excluded, but it's really difficult for some people, right? And the energies, when I was going through my awakening, I discovered that I needed to find certain teachers, and I realized that there was energies that would speed up this whole awakening process. And they did. And I found them, and I traveled around, and I, met Indian gurus and saints. And I was like, wow, I'd love to eventually do that, and that's what I do. So I run retreats. I had one of your previous guests on, Ken Fibby, if I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Ken turned up in one of my retreats about a year ago. Total newbie, totally like had never done anything really, and he had an incredible spiritual awakening, a Kundalini awakening. Yeah, I think it'd be fascinating if people go and check that one out. Actually, he had a fascinating story.
Some of my guests talk about that if you don't have a complete Kundalini awakening, have a lot of trouble from that. Things can go bad. Is that true?
Kundalini, it's very organic. I see it as being very organic. As you're going through your spiritual awakening, it's just something that happens. It's like a rewiring of the nervous system. The problem is people read about it in yogic books, or they watch YouTube videos, and they prematurely want to have an experience of a Kundalini awakening. And they may start taking up practices where they can force their own Kundalini awake. And usually that's when they can have problems. They're just not ready for a Kundalini awakening yet. So I not so much now, but I used to get a lot of emails from people who had done certain yogic practices and forced it open, and they had what's known as Kundalini syndrome, where it's just too much too soon for them, and in some people can lead to psychotic episodes if they're not spiritually mature.
Well, how does one become ready?
During my journey, I was shown that I had had a number of previous lives. I was shown my last 3 previous lives, and in all 3 of them, I had had previous spiritual awakenings. And even in my last previous life, I was a disciple of a very well-known Indian guru in India. I'd lived with them. So there's a certain level of ripeness that's needed, for people to really come into spirituality. The thing is, right? We're all we are all consciousness, right? We're all made of the same stuff. This is all our birthright. But what happens is we've got newer souls that come in, and we've got older souls, and we've got souls in the middle somehow, right? So basically what happens is the older souls are figuring this out. They've gone through thousands and thousands of lifetimes. They eventually figure out how to break free from this karmic cycle, and then what happens is they can come back and they can help the other souls out. So that's basically what happens. So usually people who get really interested in spirituality, they're older souls, and it's just their time. It's just their time to get into it.
So you mentioned that you saw some of your own past lives. If people want to begin their spiritual journey, what kind of things do you recommend for them to do?
I can't tell someone to begin their spiritual journey. I really can't. There has to be a burning desire inside that. So, like, I run retreats, and I get people who come on my retreats. Most of them are really, really dedicated. I mean, they'll travel from America, Mexico to come on a retreat with me, and they're dedicated, and they 100% want to be there. And I get other people who just, it's almost like they're window shopping. They want to come, they want to just see what it's about, but they're generally not interested. Same in my Zoom groups. I have a following of people who've been there, they never miss a meditation. And then I get some people who just come in, have an experience, and disappear. And I call them the window shoppers. So the people who are ready, really ready to go on their spiritual journey, I mean, the number one thing that I can recommend is just start with meditation. Just start sitting down by yourself, closing your eyes, meditating for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, twice a day, getting to know your own beingness without the mind involved. And that's the start. That's just the start. Is basically what happens is we start to cut out the noise from the mind. And as we cut out the noise, once it gets quieter and quieter, we start to realize that, oh, what I am is not thought, it's not emotion, it's not feeling, it's not the body. There's awareness in behind all of that. And that's what I am. So meditation is what I would prescribe to people to start getting a taste of their own beingness.
Would you say that there's a certain technique? Because it's easy to just sit there and try to clear your mind,
Yeah.
but before you realize it, you're daydreaming about something.
Sure, sure. And I mean, everybody is different. So not one technique would be right for everybody. So there's different things people can do. They can they can recite mantras, they can visualize things. I kind of like the mantras because it just sort of kind of gives that part of your mind, almost like throwing a dog a bone, right? That part of your mind that's usually busy, engaging in thoughts, all of a sudden it's fixated on the sound of the mantra, and it just concentrates on that. And basically what happens is that as you're reciting it, the mind is just totally focused on the mantra, and after a while, the mantra just disappears, and you're just left floating in in void, in consciousness. And there's different things as well. I put an awful lot of my group meditations up on my YouTube channel, and people just go along, they find the videos, they're all just done in silence, just me with my eyes closed. If you came across them just by mistake, you might go, what's this guy doing? It's just me meditating, but I transmit the energy and it actually stays in the videos. So there's some videos are 3 and 4 years old. People will still send me messages going, wow, I could feel the energy from these. And then videos are really helpful to sort of give you a kind of like a greater taste. So it's sort of like your consciousness can fuse with my consciousness, and you get a taste of something that you couldn't once see, or, if that makes sense.
Do you give the mantras on your YouTube videos?
No, I don't. I don't give mantras. No, but there's, I mean, yeah, there's different resources on my website where people can find different mantras and stuff like that. Yeah, it's not one size fits all. There's lots of different ones.
Why do you think only a small number of people have spiritual awakenings?
Again, it comes back to the new souls, the old souls. So it's our birthright. Everybody's, can eventually have this, but usually what happens is it's the people who have done multiple lifetimes, um, who are ready. Basically, what happens is the soul goes through a journey, right? It comes in as a new soul, and it gets totally mesmerized by the outside world, right? And it goes through life cycle after life cycle, thousands of them, right? And eventually it realizes that it just cannot find lasting happiness in the outside world. It doesn't come in the job, right? You might get a little taste of happiness for a couple of weeks, when you get your paycheck, the new car feels great for a week or two, and then that shiny feeling disappears, the relationship. And eventually what happens is, we realize, wow, I'm just never going to find satisfaction. And basically what happens is your soul then goes into dejection. It goes, it's not out here. I've looked everywhere. I cannot find it. And what happens is your soul sends out an SOS signal to the universe, to God, to whatever you want to call it. And eventually then what happens is, and again, it's just, I'm just using this metaphor. It's like a little light goes off, and they say, "Oh, okay, this soul down here, they've sent out the SOS signal," and then they start sending you what you need. So the book falls off the shelf. You did the recommendation on YouTube comes up. One of your guests gives them a teaching, this kind of thing, and that's basically what happens. That's what sparks people's spiritual awakening.
I think when I was with Ken, he mentioned something about Brahman consciousness. What is that?
Okay, so as the soul goes through its journey, it's a remembering, right? It first of all, it's oh, I'm a body, and then it goes into oh, I'm awareness, and then it starts to go back through all of these realizations. It starts to know itself as everything. It sees itself as everything, and eventually it remembers itself as non-existence. So consciousness, before it became conscious, was just primordial. There was no experience there. It was just void. So Brahman consciousness is when the soul, right? Our soul, ourself, is a droplet of that Brahman. And it's like an ocean that's outside of our reality. And basically what happens in Brahman consciousness is the soul gets pulled out of creation and it becomes one with that nothingness. And it's very much like, and I know your viewers will love this because a lot of them are into the NDEs. Brahman consciousness is like an NDE. It's like a near-death experience. So when I had my first encounter with Brahman, I just got to the edge of it, and it felt like I was looking at a juggernaut that was about to steamroll me. This abyss, nothingness. It was like and it wasn't even that I was going to die. It felt like I was going to be erased from the server, right? It was like there's no coming back. There's no me. There's no afterlife. It's just the absolute with no attributes, and it swallowed me up. And the experience of Brahman is you just get a taste of it just as you're about to go into it, and it's terrifying. And then when you're there, you're gone. You're just not human. You don't have a body. You've no memory, no recollection. There's no real experience. There's no suffering. And then I don't know how long I was there for. It was like 90 minutes to 2 hours. And eventually then the consciousness decides to come back into the body. What just happened? You get a sense of where you've been, and then you're back in the body. And when that happens, something snaps. The consciousness that's here now is both here, and it's what's the word? It's sort of like parallel in that place. It's outside of creation. So basically what happens is it feels like nothing ever existed. So it feels like everything that you're viewing is sort of projected on a screen of consciousness. And you kind of have a sense that if you go to the edge and you peel back the curtain, you can just see that in behind there is nothing. There never was anything. There's no past, there's no future. You're just having an experience. And that applies to people. I would notice that I would bring my kids to school, and I'd be with them and taking care of them, and I would give them a kiss as they ran into school. And as soon as I would turn around, the experience of my children would just disappear. It was like it was gone. The school would disappear, and it was really fun. It was really hard for me to find them in my consciousness. So it was almost like everything was just manifesting as I was looking at it, right, and crumbling as I turned away. And I kind of got stuck there for about 2 years, and it was a very, very strange experience for me. But that was the Brahman. That was the state of Brahman.
What do you think about synchronicities? Do you think it's our higher self talking to us when
Yeah,
these things start happening, or guides? Or
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So it's the universe or God or the larger consciousness system. It wants to evolve, okay, and we are its parts. So basically what happens as we evolve, as we start to become loving, caring individuals, right? We wake up, we start helping one another. What we learn here is the fuel that the universe uses to evolve. So it's in its interest for us to evolve. So synchronicities is the universe wanting to get our attention, putting things on our path. Chance meetings, again, the book falling off the bookshelf in the library, you open it up, it's on the page telling you about, a spiritual teaching. There's definitely, it's definitely the universe putting them on our path.
let's take us from our very first few incarnations.
Yeah.
Would you say that we're not kind, we're bad people, we're more, I don't know if animalistic is the right word, but reactionary?
I don't think any of us are inherently bad or evil. I really don't. I think basically what comes in, what happens is we come in with a low level of consciousness or a low quality of consciousness, and we come in with a lot of fear. And fear will make us carry out some very scary things with fear. Like that's the main root of suffering is people's fear. And my understanding is that as we start to shed the fear in our systems, what's actually left is love. The more fear we can get rid of, the more we just are loving. We don't have to do anything. We just uncover the love that's already there. So I think that's the case with everybody. But again, there's also randomness that goes on. We just get born into the wrong family. We start, hanging around with the wrong people or the wrong friends. And that can also lead us astray, and it can take us, my early, I wrote a book and I spoke about, nonconformity. I went through a period in my teenage years where I got into all sorts of trouble. I experimented with drugs, and I was never bad. I was never a bad person. I always had a good heart, but I just went off. I just veered off in the wrong direction. And eventually I got back. Um, I think that's the case with most people. Nobody's bad. It's just, we have fear in our systems and we just go down the wrong road.
What do you think the role of religion plays with our spiritual awakening? Because if someone had been raised let's say Catholic, they may really not connect with Buddhism or Hinduism.
All religions have a portion of truth. And again, it's like we have individuals who have these awakenings and realizations or get glimpses into the larger consciousness system. They come back and they tell other people, right? And then all of a sudden that knowledge or that wisdom that they bring back turns into a religion, right? That, this is our religion, that's your religion, and we all have our own version of our religion. Each one has a portion of truth, but we never have the absolute truth. But yes, basically what happens is when we start to go through our awakening, the universe will use images or visions of what we can relate to. So if you're brought up Catholic, Mother Mary might start turning up, or Jesus might start turning up in your dreams and teaching you. Funny enough, I was raised Catholic, grown up in Ireland, and as I started going through my awakening, I started having visitations from Hindu gods and goddesses. They started turning up. Krishna turned up, the goddess Kali, Durga, they all turned up, Shiva. And I had, just, I was like, what are these guys doing turning up? But my path was kind of Hindu. A lot of the energy work I was doing was, somehow related to them gods and goddesses.
Some of my guests will say that the Earth is a school. Some will say that this is a prison planet. What do you think the point is of coming here over and over again, and what's the meaning of life?
It's kind of both, right? It's definitely a schoolhouse, right? And again, it's up to us whether we want to partake in learning, right? So we have free will. Everything is there. If we want to progress, if we want to take that step towards awakening God, the universe, then everything gets sent our way. So it's like a schoolhouse, right? But I can also see, on the other hand, how it can appear as a prison, right? Because we can't get off it. We we might be able to meditate, we might have out of body experiences, but we always end up back here in the body. From my experience, is that there has to be rules. There's a rule set here. It's sticky. We can't just, if we have a problem with somebody, we can't just go, oh, I don't want to deal with it, and we just switch off and vanish. We're here, right? We have mortgages, we have family members, we have bills to pay. We have to go into work the next day, otherwise we can't pay our bills, right? So we're forced into dealing with them uncomfortable situations. As we start to progress, as we start to figure out the rules of the game, it gets easier to play when we know the rules, and then it can become a joy, and then it can become heaven on earth. And what was the other one? What's the meaning of life? Well, it's just to remember our true nature and become love.
Here are two questions. One is, where are you when you're not in a body? And once we finish up with all the incarnations and everything there is to learn, do you go back there or somewhere else completely?
Where do I reside when I'm not in a body? So I was shown this. So around the same time that I was shown my previous past lives, there was this really strange energetic connection, like a string that was connecting each life. And every time I would come out of them lifetimes, I would feel like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Like I missed people there, I missed family there. And I knew that they were all somehow connected along this thread. There was another period just after that where I woke up in a different reality. So these were kind of happening in lucid dreams. So I woke up and I wasn't in my typical, dream reality where everything was human. I was interacting with humans. I was in this very abstract blue reality. It looked very different. It wasn't Earth. It wasn't, where humans hung out. It was somewhere different. There were beings there. There wasn't a lot of beings there. And they were very sort of like two-dimensional. They had kind of long triangular bodies and small heads, and they glided. And there were some structures, but again, very abstract, very kind of like two-dimensional in the background, kind of looked like an oil painting. And this was where I reside when I'm not in a physical body. When I'm not human, I go there in between my lives, and I have family and I have friends there. And I mean, when I say family, it's not like family here, but they're just really deep bonds with beings there that I've probably incarnated with thousands of times. They reside there. So while I was there, they showed me how everything worked, how time worked, um, how how I'm how I decide when I want to come into a body. So basically, they they come up and they explain to me that, do you want to go in for another cycle? And I say, well, okay, maybe. And they say, well, it's just 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes. You go over to this kind of, it wasn't a VR machine, but kind of how I kind of pieced it together. It was kind of like I go up to this VR headset and put my face in, and they say, once you put your face in, it's only 20 minutes, and you go back down. So I put my face in, all of a sudden I'm coming back down that tunnel of light. And as I'm going down the tunnel of light, I realize what's just happened. I'm like, oh, I've fallen for it again. So, yes, it's only 20 minutes from that side, but I have to come back in, born as a baby, go through learning how to walk and talk and go to school and all of this stuff. And on this side where I land, it's 80 something years, right? So I have to go through it all again. I forget my true nature. I forget where I reside. All my memories fall away of where I was, and I'm back in, and I have to go through it all over again. So I lose my memories, I lose the realizations, but my quality of consciousness is the same. So yes, I'm starting off, but my quality of consciousness has taken off from where it was in my previous life. So I'm not starting from scratch, because I've accumulated love and experience, and that's what I've now entered this life with. So early on, when I was kind of went through this period of nonconformity, rebellion, rebel against teachers and police and that kind of stuff, I was kind of like, this tough kid, but was always wondering why I had this soft side, why I would care. I said, why is that? Why do I care so much about animals and people's feelings? And it was because I know that I came in with a high quality of consciousness. I just forgot about it for a certain period of time. And that's why when I started going through my spiritual awakening, it unfolded very, very fast, because I had done it in previous lifetimes. So it was, yeah, so that's where I am in between lives. And the other question was?
Once you've completed all your lifetimes here, do you go back there?
Yeah. So it depends. So so in between life, so if you leave the body here, you can go there and you can have a great time. You can hang out with your friends. You can you can take a rest period for God knows how long. But there's always work to do. This is all about, like, you're serving something greater than yourself. So usually what happens is you come back in to help. You come back in to help those who are still going through it. And that's usually, those are the teachers, those are the Indian saints that come in. They've done it. They've gone through lifetime after lifetime. You don't, my understanding is that you don't just disappear and merge in with God, and that's just the rest of your life. You live in bliss, floating in the void, happy. You come back in service to help others.
You mentioned that you fell for it again
Yeah.
while you were going down the tunnel.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they tricked you in a malicious way, or they pushed you down the
No.
tunnel because you need to do some more work?
More work. It was kind of done in a playful way. It was kind of like, oh, I see what they did. The kind of, I made the choice, right? But it was sort of like, oh, they kind of pulled a fast one. Not in a bad way. Not in a like, you know. I have to say, I love my life. And if I got to come in again and do the same job that I'm doing now, um, I'd be happy to do lifetime after lifetime, because that's that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help. That's my mission. That's my goal. And I'll come back down that tunnel again.
The problem is it takes so much time for you to get to your spiritual awakening. If you ever get
Yeah.
there, because you could get lost in all the things
Yes.
to do here and ever make it.
Yeah. Yeah, that could happen. That could definitely happen. And you know, it nearly happened to me. And funny enough, I have a feeling that early on I went through an illness. I got this illness that just completely sidetracked me, put me in bed for 2 or 3 years. And my sense was that it was a way for me to burn off a lot of karma in a very um, fast pace. Yeah. It was like, we need to get you back on track. Here's an illness. Let's burn off a lot of that karma that you accumulated.
Well, Gareth, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions or find out more about what you're up to. Are you open to
Yes.
that? And if so, what's the best way to contact you?
Okay, so there's a number of ways people can get in contact with me. I wrote a book about 2.5 years ago that has my full story. It's called Waking Up from the Dream by Gareth Duignam, and that's on Amazon. You can get it on all the Amazon websites. They can reach me on my website, truespiritualawakening.eu, or my YouTube channel is True Spiritual Awakening as well. And they are more than welcome to join. I do every Tuesday and every Friday at 9 p.m. UK time. I do a free group on Zoom, and it's open to everybody. Doesn't matter what your background is. If you want to just come once or twice, if you want to, you know, it's open to everybody. It's like an hour and a half meditation that anyone can join, and they get a taste of the energies that I transmit. And they can also just find the YouTube channel, and all my teachings and videos are on there as well.
Do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
I mean, yeah, I also run retreats as well, but like my retreats they're super hard to get on because I'm so busy. But yeah, I'm kind of working on a few things to kind of facilitate where I can fit more people in. So there again, they can go on my website and look for some of the retreats that I offer. I'm doing 2 in America in November in San Francisco. Yeah, there's still a few little spaces left on them, 1 or 2 spaces, but most of them I run in Europe.
Well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
People, they need to go within, right? I mean, you can hear someone's great story, or you know, you can read their book or watch their video, and it can be fascinating, right? It can prise our mind open just enough. But the real journey is when we kind of journey within. We quiet down the mind, we stop all the noise coming in, and we start to become one with our own uniqueness, our own brilliance, because we are all pieces of God, and all we need to do is just uncover what's blocking that, and it's there for everybody. They don't need to have a near-death experience to uncover it either.
Gareth, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Really, really enjoyed today. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.